Hello, welcome to Take Time Thursday. Today, we will talk about dealing with trauma using mindfulness approaches during the pandemic and beyond. I'm excited about today's presenters, Dr. Abyssinia Washington, or Dr. Abby, as she likes to be referred to as, and Dr. Ann Dutton. I'm thankful for their participation today to bring this very much needed subject to our attention. We all have to figure out ways and how we can deal with all of the stress that we are dealing with right now. There's so many things that cause us to lose our minds right now, but we're not going to do it. That's why we're presenting all of these speakers so that we can be informed on how to actually deal with this stress. Take Time Thursdays with the Anacostia Museum gives participants a chance to take time for wellness, health, and creativity with artists, thought leaders, performers, wellness practitioners, and others. Just take a 30-minute break with us each Thursday from 2:30 to 3 p.m. and boost your mind, your body, and your spirit. Before I bring on our guest presenters, I wanted to give the rules of engagement. We will have a Q&A, a brief Q&A after their presentation, and you can type your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat. And now I will turn it over to today's presenters. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Janelle. Appreciate being here. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of myself and my co-presenter, Dr. Abyssinia Washington, who will say more about herself in just a moment. I am Ann Dutton. I'm a clinical psychologist at Georgetown University Medical Center, and I engage in research, teaching, and clinical practice. I also teach mindfulness classes. This webinar is conducted in collaboration with the Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum and Georgetown Howard University's Center for Clinical and Translational Science. We also want to thank our working group led by Dr. Fanny Richardson and also Janice Farabee, Renee McGee, Dr. Carla Williams, and Tawara Good for their careful work to get us here today. A word about our topic. Take your time. Dealing with trauma using mindfulness approaches during the pandemic and beyond. Trauma is something that happens to us. It is not something that is wrong with us. It happens to our bodies when we're exposed to something overwhelms our body and our mind. The current pandemic has brought trauma to individuals, to communities, to healthcare workers, on top of the already existing, and in some cases, long-standing traumas of institutional oppression, violence and abuse, medical traumas, and so many losses. Trauma degrades our physical health, our emotional health, and our ability to think and to function. So then we can ask the question, what does mindfulness have to do with it? What is mindfulness? The mind is all about awareness, but not awareness of things in the past and not awareness of things in the future, but awareness of the present moment. So as John Kabat-Zinn describes, mindfulness is being aware of the present moment in a particular way and without judgment. But what are we focusing on in the present moment? Mindfulness practice trains our attention to our body and also our mind in the present in each next moment without judgment. Often a first place to begin is to focus on the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, the sensation of the air as it comes in and out of our body. We can focus attention on the sensation of the air at the nostril or in the rise and fall of the chest or the belly. This and other mindfulness practices have been shown through research to help to regulate our physiological nervous system and, importantly, our emotion regulation. Both of these are important to help respond to chronic stress and trauma. The scientific community is continuing to study many aspects of mindfulness practice and how they can help improve our health, our well-being, and our functioning. following exposure to the pandemic, to sexual and physical trauma, serious medical conditions, and chronic discrimination and oppression. Research has already shown beneficial effects of mindfulness practice for anxiety, depression, sleep, pain, traumatic stress, academic and job performance, school performance, and parenting for adults, but also for teens and even for children. Now let's hear more from Dr. Abby Washington.
And before I get started, I wanted to let you know that we're going to engage in a hopefully fun mini exercise at the end of my presentation, the portion of my presentation. And what you'll need is super easy, but if you have some aromatherapy oils at home, and you're able to grab them, that would be great. If you don't, and you even have some herbs that might be in your refrigerator, like rosemary or sage or a cinnamon stick in your pantry, and you're able to grab that for a little bit later on, that would be awesome too. All right, let's get started. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Abyssinia Washington Tabron. That's long. So most times I just go by Dr. Abby for short. I'm a clinical psychologist, therapist, and consultant, and the vast majority of my work is focused on working with children and adults who've experienced childhood adversity, trauma, or loss and grief. When I meet people for the first time and we might share what we do for work, the most common response I get is, "I don't know how you do that." I think by this they mean willing to work in the space of human suffering. While I recognize that, yes, there is a significant portion of my interactions that initially center on addressing something deeply sad, distressing, or upsetting, I actually see the opportunity in these interactions. Opportunities to facilitate comfort, healing, advocacy, and renewal. Actually, what pains me more is to witness people get hijacked. First, we were told, with little time to spare, to leave where we were, leave our space and colleagues and ways of operating because there was a new, unwelcome stranger among us, and sharing breath could harm us and each other. Take a breath. Then we were told that there was credible scientific data showing that for people of color, in particular African American people, this new unwelcome stranger was disproportionately cruel and unfair. That this virus that attacked one's ability to breathe would make the fight even more treacherous for African Americans than for others. Take a breath. Be grateful for that breath. Then we saw with our own eyes and heard with our own ears. So we were collectively traumatized by the homicide rule so of George Floyd by the Minneapolis Police Department. It's harder to breathe now. And we had to wait together for a response that merited and justified what we had just witnessed. But it did not come, and we were once again traumatized. Our breaths are shallow and stiff and short, but we need air. We are out here fighting to breathe as it is, and you are out here suffocating me. Peaceful protests, nighttime riots, looting, donations to legal defense funds, Black Twitter, Facebook, prayer vigils, fundraisers, go vote, CNN till 4 a.m. Back to work. Take a breath. Truly breathing again will take a medical miracle as well as a complete social, legal, and political reset. But fortunately, all of these are in the works. Maybe the best we can do is ensure we are in collective step and breath with progress, wisdom, and health. We can talk, discuss, and share together. That's the invitation because we are still breathing. During the past 12 months, I reflected on those glaring events that forced shifts in our normal life. The worldwide pandemic, the reckoning with racial injustice in America and beyond, the financial crisis, and most recently, the political insurrection that included a physical attack on democracy or symbols of democracy. One theme that ran through these events for me was the literal or symbolic attack on the breath. We learned that COVID-19 was particularly insidious and disabling to our ability to just breathe. For too many, ventilators became their lifeline to breath. And even for those of us that did not require those extraordinary interventions to breathe, we all needed the mask. The mask that helps to keep us safe also, in some measure, obstructs our ability to just freely breathe. But it is necessary. We saw with our own eyes another human being, our brother, take his last breath. His breath this time was obstructed by the knee of a police officer as witnesses begged for his life. We all collectively felt the sharp pain and heaviness of struggling to breathe and to reconcile the senselessness of it all. Even as we banded together to express the urgency for change, tear gas was used against peaceful protesters to stifle their voice. "I can't breathe" became a cry for help heard all around the globe. As our country free fell into a financial crisis, we would know neighbors who just weeks prior were able to feed their families now wait in line for hours outside of food banks. If anyone knows the feeling of serious financial distress, you know that the anxiety and fear of it all just leaves you breathless. You allow yourself shallow, short breaths for survival's sake. But the weight of it all is suffocating. Only a few weeks ago, the persistent, heightened political rhetoric, yelling, etc., led to a riot invading our capital. Armed with gas, CO2, once again, we were witnessing an attack on the breath of our nation. We need breath. It's essential for life. More than that, though, the quality of our breath is directly correlated with the quality of our whole health. If it is short, halting, or heavy and labored, we will lack the very air we need to function and think fully. As people of color, sometimes it's hard to recognize the toll of living in bodies and minds that have been subject to historical oppression and brutality, as well as current aggressions and microaggressions that result from prejudices, discrimination, bigotry, and being disenfranchised. Resmaa Menakem, author of My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma, and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, talks about the phenomenon of ancestral traumatic retention to describe how the bodies of people of color, particularly Black, Brown, and Native bodies, retain the trauma suffered by our ancestors and transmit this on a cellular level, even transcribed in our DNA, from one generation to the next generation. And current life experiences that expose us to microaggressions on a daily basis place undue demands on our nervous systems, activating persistent stress responses that take an enormous toll on our health, relationships, self-esteem, and outlook. So, does that mean that trauma is contagious? Well, this is a very important question, and one of the main reasons it's important to care for ourselves, each other, and our communities. What happens when we're overly stressed or our communities are in distress? Well, the people around us are impacted by that energy in our state of being. Just like when we're healthy emotionally and physically, the people around us benefit from that. Knowing this provides an incentive for us to recognize places where we're hurting and take care of ourselves. Trauma can be really tricky in that it leaves invisible scars. It's not like a broken arm or a bleeding cut. Trauma produces wounds and scars that people cannot always see just by looking at us. In fact, we or others might not even know there's a serious problem until issues in our life make acknowledging it unavoidable. Let's promise to try to move past only seeing physical injuries as legitimate or warranting of attention. Let's also try to validate when we see each other in emotional distress and move with the same urgency to provide support and compassion. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk wrote one of my all-time favorite books on the subject of trauma called The Body Keeps Score. I mean, the title says it all, doesn't it? As you can probably tell, and as Dr. Dutton shared, trauma is something that happens to us. It is not something that is wrong with us. It happens to our bodies when we're exposed to something that overwhelms our bodies and our minds. We actually experience trauma on a multisensory level, meaning it is in what we see, hear, touch, and even smell. As a result, the pathways back to healing and restoration are often in activities that engage our whole selves. Even though I'm a therapist, I often encourage people to explore non clinical or medical ways of healing, such as yoga, meditation, nature walks, aromatherapy, healing circles, prayer, listening to mantras, chants, or gongs. Okay, this may sound weird to you at first, but remember, these practices have been deeply rooted in our ancestors' healing and way of life, and they've served generations of strong people way before modern medicine. Just to be clear, talking to a trained professional like a therapist has enormous benefits. I think everyone should try it at least one, and for some, it is a necessary component of their well being and stability. What I'm also suggesting, though, is that we're open to incorporating other mindfulness practices in our daily routines because they support our brain and nervous system in building new, healthy neural pathways for healing and feeling integrated and whole. Why is reaching out for help so hard, though? Well, sadly, there is still quite a bit of stigma attached to asking for help when we're traumatized, lonely, or distressed. Some of the reasons for that are baked up into our upbringings, messages from our family or culture, ideas about what it means to be strong. Let's explore stigma as it relates to asking for help and sharing our stories when we are either hurting or need support. For those of us working in the helping profession or used to being in caretaking roles, asking for help may seem foreign to us. When we're used to being in the role of putting others first or before ourselves, asking for help may feel like surrendering part of that identity. Also, the pressure of stigma may be imposed by others. When people have been used to seeing you as the one to solve issues, be strong, fix things, survive no matter what, always be there, provide support, they become invested in that persona and image, even though in a way it can rob you of your own humanness, your need to also need help and support, because everyone does. And then add to that, there is often culturally imposed values and norms and beliefs around help seeking behaviors that just squarely prop up stigma. For example, men don't ask for help. Christians only need their pastor. Black people don't talk about their family affairs. Therapy is for rich people or sick people. Yoga is for white people. These myths go on, but they act as subtle cultural thieves to a vast array of potential opportunities for healing, support, and friendship. Stigma really is a thief to our living to the best of our potential. So while we champion accessing support, resources, and intervention for others in our community, let's also recognize our own challenges or barriers to reaching out today and work on making that a little bit lighter tomorrow. Therapy really is for everybody. We all have the innate birthright to live and thrive free of emotional burdens and preventable suffering. Taking your time means taking moments to reflect and honor your own unique pathways to healing. During the pandemic or before, you may have discovered activities that give you joy, make your soul sing, activities that are almost like meditation, like baking bread. Be intentional about prioritizing time for these activities. Treat them as sacred to your well being and emotional health. I have a really simple but restorative activity that I wanted to share with you that I talked about at the opening of my talk with you. Remember how we talked about trauma being multisensory? Well, today I'm going to show you how to engage your olfactory senses in a way that is super easy and can really shift your mood and sense of calmness. Since the events over the past year have been extremely challenging to our breath, this mini exercise is a way to reclaim and empower our breath. Scents are extremely evocative and they can shift attention, enhance our mental states, and also aid in stress reduction. So let's get started. All right, I'm trying to share my video. Mark, would you mind allowing my video to share?
Okay, you should be able to.
Thank you. There you are. Hello, everyone. So I have a really quick activity that I like to do for myself because it can be just so stressful. I asked you to maybe find some essential oils. These are some of my favorite. You can find them in Whole Foods and any kind of grocery store. But if you don't have those, you might have like little lavender pieces at home. This is some sage. This is some rosemary. These also have their own essential oils like built right in. And so they're excellent for doing this activity. Essentially, what we do is, and I'm going to use lavender today. You just take a few dabs into the palm of your hand. It's not overly wet, it's just enough in the palm of your hand so that your palm is moist. And then you rub your hands together. Essentially, what you're doing right now is you're warming those oils. And those oils are getting really accustomed to your own body temperature, and they're releasing even more of their like amazing scents and properties. And then you can make your own like little hand oven. See that? And then not over your eyes, but over your nose. You take a huge inhale in and remove it from your face and exhale out. Just like that, just like that. And almost immediately, you can feel a sense of calm, or maybe there's a sense of energy that you're looking for. Maybe it's just before bedtime and you just want that extra boost to go to sleep, or you want to refocus. So that's my like little tip that I hope that you will take with you beyond this talk today. I'm going to turn it over to, actually, we have a little bit of time for you to put some questions if you have them, comments, anything that you want to share in the chat. And Dr. Finney Richardson will be able to bring those up for us.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Finney Richardson, and we have a few questions for our panelists. The first question is, can you discuss your thoughts on the importance of Black people receiving therapy from Black therapists?
Well, I can. So it's Dr. Abby again. And while I am a Black therapist, I also have lots of colleagues that are coming from all kinds of different races, backgrounds, religions, and you name it. The most important factor in the success of therapy, what we found, is the relationship between the therapist and the client. So that therapeutic alliance is the most important factor. For some people, it is just incredibly important for them to feel like they are sharing their truths and sharing their vulnerability with somebody that looks exactly like them. And for some people, that's not as important of an issue. The most important issue, though, I want you to like really kind of take this home, is the quality of the relationship between you and the therapist. And that does not necessarily just have to, that cannot necessarily just be established if you share the same race and culture.
Thank you, Dr. Abby. We have another question from Dr. Jean Ann Achterberg. How does distant intentionality influence your work?
Who's that question?
I'm not sure if that's for me or not, but can you, what was that word? Finney?
Yes. The question is, how does distant intentionality influence your work?
I would actually need to know more about that particular term to answer the question. I know it's kind of awkward to try to share conversations through the chat that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we can do is follow up with that attendee offline to get a bit more information, and I'll facilitate that for you.
Okay, or is that the only way? Are we allowed to do anything other than the chat, or is the chat the only way?
Well, she actually asked it again. How does emotional freedom technique impact your work?
Well, my work, I mean, I personally have, and this is not something that, it's such an interesting question because it's not something, honestly, that we learned in graduate school. There was like just no sort of formal training in some of the ideas and the concepts and the philosophical underpinnings of like what has now become so much more important in the way that I practice with other people, how I authentically engage with other people. But the whole concept of freedom has really been something that I've been on my own personal journey with, professionally and personally, because that is really something that has deep meaning for people in very unique ways.
I have a question. I heard that you work really well with young people. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I take it really close to heart because oftentimes, you know, with children, we can sort of feel like, well, if children go through hardships, adversity, trauma, and if they're not saying anything about it, maybe it's not affecting them. Or you know what? They're too young to like even realize it, like it's a big deal, you know? But the truth of the matter is that even from infancy, like we have research that shows that even infants experience deep feelings of grief, loss, depression, even. You know, that's the whole failure to thrive concept, you know, that perfectly healthy babies, you know, can actually start to succumb to like a deterioration because of another reason other than their physiology or their physical health. Okay. And so I feel very strongly that children are especially wired and unique in that way for healing. They have a lot of neural and brain plasticity, so it makes them especially prone to be able to heal and recover from things. But we have to be intentional about giving them the resources and the support and the acknowledgement for when they go through difficult things. and to be there.
Now, it's been a rise in the news about a lot of teen suicides, particularly Black males. And we have a question in the chat that talks similar to this. Hold on. It says, how will this pandemic impact current in-hospital workers now and beyond? And then what can I do for teens to increase activity beyond virtual? That's a two-part question.
Yes. So the first part, and I was just talking to someone very close to me today about, what first care responders are, doctors and nurses. And, let's just not also forget there are so many allied professionals that are in these spaces of medical and public health care that are making sure that these rooms are cleaned and people have supplies, and there's a whole there's a machine of people. But we really, and while we are grateful for their work, like, I don't think that we have really been intentional enough about taking time to think about what the onslaught of all the time, every time, like, loss of people, even people that you might not know personally, and the suffering has, and what kind of toll that takes on the human psyche. They're expected to just continue to work. And we know that that comes at a cost. Whether you're a firefighter, a police officer, emergency room nurse, these things come at a cost, and we need to take the time to let the mind and the soul and the spirit heal in the same way that we would any other physical injury.
Okay, well, thank you. We are running out of time. If you guys have any follow-up questions, we will post in the chat. Finney, can you post it for me? Where they can contact people. I did post earlier in the chat some email addresses. You can contact them directly, but can you put the website address up there for us? I wanted to close with just saying, us as people of color, we need to be intentional about talking to our peers, our family, our colleagues, about let's get rid of the old adage that Black people don't need to go to therapy, that we go to church. Yeah, we go to church, okay, some of us, but it's nothing wrong with seeking help. And a lot of times we can be overstressed and not even realize it. And when that stress starts to compile itself, then it starts to break down your body. And so we just need to really just get rid of that old myth that we don't need therapy. We're human like everyone else. We all need therapy at some point in our lives. And I think it's very, very helpful. So I want to thank you all for our mental health doctors on today. The professionals are in the building, and we thank you for sharing this. Again, if you have any questions, there's so many contact information right here in the chat. And if you need more, you can contact me at cooperjr@si.edu. I thought it would be nice to close the program with this little small poem. It's called Breathe, Invisible Poem. You who let yourselves feel, enter the breathing. That is more than your own. Let it brush your cheeks as it divides and rejoins beside you. Blessed ones, whole ones, you where the heart begins, you are the bow that shoots the arrows, and you are the target. Fear not the pain. Let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy the seas. The trees you planted in childhood have grown too heavy. You cannot bring them along. Give yourselves to the air, to what you cannot hold. This is a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke. You can look it up. It's from Sonnets to Orpheus, Part 1. All right, I will close the program with that. And there's nothing else to be said. Thank you for joining us today as I'm losing my voice. We hope that you will join us for Black History Month. And we have a wonderful array of programs planned for Black History Month. So please check our website at anacostia.si.edu/events and sign up for the ones that you're interested in. Thank you again for joining us today and have a lovely afternoon. Bye now.